Hi and welcome. So let's talk about Scorpio Moon, and completely off topic, but I don't know what my hair is doing today. I spent about 100 minutes trying to set it some sort of way. I always feel like I look so different after I've shaven, and I don't know what way to do my hair then because I feel like I look different and it looks weird no matter what way I do it, if it's a certain length. Yeah, let's talk about Scorpio Moon. So I have some notes that I made that I want to discuss. So the moon is our emotional imprint, and it's something that either gets it gets developed a certain way in childhood. So we're born with this emotional imprint that has a collection of emotional needs attached to it, and then the experiences that we have as a child, particularly with our parents, especially with the mother, that then sort of conditions how our emotional needs act or develop over time. So there's a lot of different, theories about emotional needs, and there's attachment styles, and there's all kinds of different things that come into play. But when it comes to the moon, it's like the moon gets conditioned a certain way in childhood based on how we interact with our parents, and especially the mother, and how that interacts with our core baseline emotional needs. So everything is like interlinked, right? So there's elements of Scorpio Moon that might develop in a very healthy way if your relationship with your mother is on the healthy side, let's say. But there's certain other things that can become like problematic if certain emotional needs are not met, and that can happen with any moon sign. But I want to talk in this video, and I might make other videos for other moon signs as well about their emotional needs, but I want to discuss in this video about Scorpio Moons, some of Scorpio Moons, what I would consider some of Scorpio Moons, and what I've learned, what I consider some of Scorpio Moon's core emotional needs. I have some notes, so I might be looking down at my phone sometimes. The way that our emotional needs are nurtured or not very adequately nurtured, that gets carried on into our adulthood as well. So, for example, like Scorpio Moons can be very moody if they didn't have sufficient outlets, for example, in childhood for some of their more extreme or some of their more difficult moods or emotions. So Taurus is on the Taurus Scorpio axis, which among other things has to do with the body. So what does the body say to you? What does the body want to say to you? And what does that mean? What are the underlying meanings and the underlying processes that are happening? So if our body tells us something, like for example, if you're using myself as an example, like I can feel anxiety in my legs, so I can feel this kind of tension and this strong sense of anxiety like in my legs. It's like there's something collected in my legs. And so what is that trying to tell me? Did something happen that has made me anxious? Have I had certain thoughts circling my head that is making me anxious? Or like, is there something from the past that I'm holding on to that is time for me to creatively let go maybe of these things, or talk about it in some way to kind of get it out, so that this anxiety can leave my body. There's also things like meditation that really work for me, especially lately. I've been doing that a lot. It's just like not instant, but like it's almost instant relaxation, right? And it's like getting your mind empty almost. It's almost like, yeah, I have thoughts still, but it's going to be a little bit more like easy, and it's going to be less overwhelming when I'm meditating. My thoughts are less overwhelming when I'm meditating. My anxiety is less overwhelming when I'm meditating. So that can really work for like an anxious Scorpio Moon, for example. So what does the body want to tell you is one angle of the Scorpio Moon. So Scorpio Moon comes into this body and into this lifetime with almost like an unusually heightened and intense emotional framework a network of different emotions and feelings, right? So what needs to be looked at? What needs to be addressed? It might be that there's some trauma. Scorpio and Scorpio Moon can have to do with trauma and looking at trauma and what is really going on, like under the surface, right? Like I say, anxiety can also be part of the picture. So Scorpio Moon, no matter what it's what it's dealing with, it tends to have like a heightened version of that in some sense. Like it can be very heightened in terms of its joy, and like it can be euphoric, it can be really down in the dumps, it can be really depressed, it can be very anxious, it can be and it also there can be different colors of emotions kind of coming together and interlinking, so that you have not just one core emotion. Well, you might have one core emotion, but then you have all these other things as well. So it's a very emotional sign. And if you have like Moon in Scorpio, it's your emotional world is colored by that intensity a lot of the time. And I think that word intense is something that, we need to be careful with how we use that. And it sounds like, some kind of terrible thing sometimes, like, that person is very intense. In some cases, Scorpio Moon can come across intense. In other cases, it's more that their emotional reactions and what they're dealing with emotionally can just be a little bit more heightened, and it can be a little bit more of a signifier of that there is something to be looked at, right? Scorpio wants to actually look at things and kind of penetrate into the situation. So when you have your Moon there, it's like you need to understand what your body, Taurus Scorpio axis, what your body is telling you, and what does that mean? Like, what is it from the past? A lot of the times it's things from the past that are gathered like in your emotional body and in your physical body. And so you're ideally trying to understand like what is causing this, and like how can I move forward with this energy and this all these emotional like things in my body that are stored in my body and in my emotional body, and like how can I move on with that as a more like empowered individual in some sense, if you want to use that word. So one need of the Scorpio Moon is to be able to like dig beneath the surface of their own like emotions and what they're feeling physically, emotionally, and what does that mean. And Scorpio Moons, particularly if we're talking about Scorpio Moon children, like when I was a Scorpio Moon child, and I think Scorpio Moons and Scorpio Moon children, they have to be able to allow, you have to allow them almost to feel into their extreme emotions, and try to guide them in understanding that this is not just, you're not just like struggling for no reason. Like there's a reason why you're feeling this way, and like how can you cope with this? I think sometimes people say about Scorpio Moon that Scorpio Moon just comes into their lifetime with more a bigger need for a lot of tools to kind of cope emotionally, because they can struggle with their own emotional imprint, because it is confusing. Like we have to look deeper to understand it, right? So it's hard to just accept or be happy with something that you don't understand, right? So like if you just look at the surface, you're not going to be able to necessarily accept your feelings, because there's a deeper layer of it that you don't understand unless you look deeper. But Scorpio Moon will want to look deeper, hopefully. So there is that because the Scorpio archetype or the Scorpio sign has to do with already looking deeper, then having a Scorpio Moon means that like, yeah, you will have certain emotional imprints, but you will want to look deeper as well. So it's a good thing that you will want to look deeper, because if you don't look deeper, then you're not going to be able to understand what is going on emotionally on the surface, because you have to kind of understand it on a deeper level. So the Scorpio Moon child, for example, and the Scorpio Moon adult might have a strong need to ask questions, to talk about how they're feeling. I think parents would do well to kind of allow this. like to allow the Scorpio Moon to ask questions and to live out their emotions in some way, because you have to, the Scorpio Moon almost needs to like feel into the intensity and the extremes at times of their emotions. It's like an emotional need. We all have our emotional needs based on our moon sign. So one of the Scorpio Moon's emotional needs is to feel into the extremes sometimes, and the intensity, and sometimes the chaos of what they're feeling, and then learn something and then come out of it feeling relaxed and feeling like more empowered, or just feeling more calm, because they went through those emotional stages and that digging into their emotions. So you kind of come out of it with a bigger understanding, right? Some Scorpio moons will have an emotional need also to do some kind of spiritual work, some kind of deeper spiritual work, or study it in depth, or just study something like astrology, maybe tarot, how emotions live in the body. Like I feel like a lot of Scorpio moons would be intrigued by things like that. I want to do more reading about that. I get through books a little bit too slowly. There's so many books I want to read, but it just takes me a long time. But I want to read books about, like how emotions are stored in the body, and like how they live in the body, and like what does that mean, and like how we can like nurture that and how we can cope with that. I think that is something that would be very like extremely interesting and intriguing for a Scorpio moon person. So some Scorpio moons might want to look at like the darker areas of life, darker subjects, maybe some like just things that not everybody's going to want to like talk about or look at, but they're going to want to talk about it and look at it, right? No matter what form that takes. It could be astrology or tarot. It could be something even like darker. I don't know. Like there's a lot of different levels, and there's different areas, and there's different stages. There's different ways that can manifest. Therapy is of course beneficial for these kinds of people as well, I would say. It may not always work depending on the kind of therapist as well, like who is really willing to look deeper and have that insight. I think Scorpio moon oftentimes is interested in looking at insight and getting insight from people or from themselves, like insight into what is going on emotionally, right? So the body is saying something. There's all these things not conjured up, but there's all these things stored. Like our emotional memory is stored like in our body, and like the Scorpio moon has a need to want to explore that. Like they want to explore like what is actually going on and how to actually overcome it. So like I know I've known different Scorpio moon people, and particularly I can think of one example of somebody who seems to have a similar emotional imprint to me, because we both have that same signature, and like it seems like we are both always dealing with something emotionally, even if, let's say in his case, it might be a bit more obvious in some sense, like he kind of really wears that on his sleeve in a way, whereas I don't think. But maybe I do. It depends as well on different circumstances and things like that, in different situations. But like some Scorpio moon people will be very visibly into the exploration of darker and like deeper subjects. Like they kind of wear that on their sleeve in a way. Others may seem like they're pretty together. And they might be together, like Scorpio moon can be together, and it's also a sign that's quite like it can be quite strong, and it can be quite resilient if it's tapping into its own like inner reserves, right? Its emotional reserves, and like how can I survive in this situation? Survival instinct is very Scorpio, but I'm kind of going off track, but like Scorpio moon needs include just being able to feel into your emotions and like understanding it and looking at it at a deeper level, and then coming out of it empowered, or coming out of it ready to face the next challenge. Yeah, there's probably more that I could say, but I want to leave it at that. I might make, like I say, other videos about other moon signs and their emotional needs, particularly some of the ones that I've been thinking about lately, based on as well people that I know in my life and their moon signs and what I can kind of see that their emotional needs are, and I can kind of connect that back to astrology. But if you like this, do leave a like and subscribe if you want more. Thank you.